It's done. We passed our final inspection. It took a year to get the plans approved, and another year for the construction. There were so many setbacks and frustrating moments that made this seem like it wasn't worth it. But we got through it one step at a time, and now we have a completed building. This is definitely an experience that has taught me a bunch about constructing a building from the ground up. Let's take a look back at how it happened. If you want to see a more detailed explanation of a specific section, click on a corresponding link at the top as it appears. This building is 45 feet long by 20 feet wide. 1/3 of it is a guest house, 300 square feet, and 2/3 of it is the workshop, 600 square feet. When we first moved into the house, the backyard was a cluster of clutter. A maze of planters, mismatched pavers, doilies everywhere. A group effort helped demo a bunch of it. A shed that was infested with termites, a giant eucalyptus tree, and just a bunch of other stuff. I filled a 40-yard dumpster to the brim. At this point, what's left was a ton of concrete, brick, and a foundation. Stuff that was way past my ability to remove. So I hired a demo crew, and they did a fantastic job clean slating the spot for the new building. Not only did they clear out the stuff, but they graded the land as well. It sat like this for over a year collecting weeds. After a very long waiting game trying to get our permits approved, construction finally started. In preparation for the foundation, we had to dig down 5 feet and recompact the dirt to a certain compaction percentage. This helps give the building a sturdy foundation and avoids settling. If the ground under the concrete moves, it could cause long-term cracks or damage the building. It was an enormous amount of dirt to move, but absolutely important for the structural integrity of the building. When the rough grade was signed off, work on the foundation could begin. Footings were dug, forms were placed, sewer lines were trenched in, and rebar was laid and tied together. When all the prep work was done, the concrete was poured. And holy cow, was that a sight to see. The first major element of the building. I think the most amazing part of the concrete pour was how fast it happened. Within a few hours, it was poured, finished, and the crew cleaned up and split. "10 days later, after giving the foundation ample time to cure, framing commenced. The crew started throwing up wall after wall. Within 2 days, all the walls were up. The building that we've been waiting for so long was finally appearing before our very eyes. So freaking cool. I spent so much of this time observing the framers and learning as much about this process as possible. By the next week, the shear walls were secured, the roof was assembled, and all the roof sheathing was tacked down. It's kind of amazing how fast the framing happens. One day, a big stack of lumber is dropped off, and a few days later, a building appears. Once the framing was done, the roofing went on almost immediately after. If the roof stayed exposed for too long, it would risk being damaged by water if it rained. The roofing is made up of a couple of layers and was completed within a few hours. The guts of the house were the next steps. The electrical, plumbing, and mechanical systems were roughed in. The electrical was much more extensive than the others. As far as plumbing goes, there's one bathroom, a kitchen sink, and a workshop sink. So a handful of water inlets and a couple of drain vents. The mechanical system is just a bathroom vent fan and a small air conditioner. We decided to upgrade the electrical system from the original plan to include more power in the workshop portion, as well as the guest house portion. This caused a significant delay in construction because we had to go through an approval process with the permit office for the changes. Some of the walls on the building are shear walls. That's why they have the OSB board on them. It's meant to keep the building stable in the event of an earthquake. The insulation had to go in soon, and it would be a lot easier to put it in if the entire building was sheathed. It also would be better for the siding if the entire outside was solid. So I went ahead and picked up some more sheets of OSB and filled in all the sections that were still open. The alternative would have been to put strips on the studs to bring everything to the same level. Before doing any of the insulation, the crew put on the house wrap. This is meant to act as a water barrier, so if water gets underneath the siding, It runs down the house wrap and out the bottom. Just like roof shingles, it's overlapped from the bottom to the top. This is the point at which I really started to get involved in the construction. Now that all the internal systems were installed and the building was wrapped, I could start putting in the insulation. Different spots of the building called for a different type of insulation. The R value is essentially the rating of how well the insulation prevents heat transfer. The walls were either R19 or R21. The ceiling was R38 and the rafters were R13. I put R19 in the vaulted ceiling rafters because it's the only line of defense between that and the outside world. I don't have a ladder that reaches the top of the vaulted ceiling, so to reach that area and to work more efficiently, I built some temporary scaffolding that was not for the faint of heart. In other words, it was kinda sketchy, but it worked. Insulation requires a vapor barrier to prevent moisture transfer. Some insulation, called faced insulation, has the vapor barrier included. However, most of this insulation did not have it, so I stapled large plastic sheets over all the surfaces and taped the seams. It was a bit difficult working solo with large sheets, but I got it done. As of now, there isn't any air conditioning in the workshop, and there aren't any plans to add it later on. Therefore, doing a thorough job with the insulation is super important, so I'm not working in an oven. Time to close up the walls. I started with the drywall. Hanging drywall is relatively easy, just important to use enough screws to hold it up. The time-consuming part is mudding, covering up all the screws and blending all the seams and corners. I'm sure a pro could knock it out a lot quicker than I did, and I even asked for a few quotes, but I saved quite a bit by doing it myself. I drywalled all of the guest house, walls and ceiling. I also had to put drywall on one wall of the workshop because it was the dividing wall. I painted it white so I can use it as a backdrop for filming marble machines, and so I can use it as a projector screen. For the rest of the workshop, including the walls and ceiling, I put up plywood. I had been shopping around trying to decide what kind of plywood to use, and finally found this 1/2-inch thick Russian birch. It just has a bright, clean look to it. With 9 plies, it's a really good quality and super strong. I'll be able to screw anything anywhere on the walls and trust that it'll hold. I ordered 55 sheets, which was a few more than I needed. It took 5 days to install all the sheets. I started from the bottom and worked my way up. I rented a drywall lift for the flat ceiling. It made it so easy to raise the sheets up high. This lift was just barely able to reach the first row of the vaulted ceiling. I returned the first lift and rented a second lift that was supposed to go up even higher. Unfortunately, this one wasn't able to reach the top either. But I needed to finish the job, so I got creative and made it work. The janky scaffolding came in handy one last time. With all the plywood on the walls, this room really started looking like a workshop. There is so much potential, so many projects just waiting to be built. It makes me excited for what the future holds. Okay, after the inspection for the inside walls, work on the outside could continue. We went with hardy board lap siding. It has such a cool look to it. I think it looks a lot better than stucco or board and batten. The final look of it is good, but I had a few issues with the installers. The boards come in 12-foot sections, and where 2 boards butt together, you're supposed to put a metal plate behind it so water runs back out instead of into the crack. They said they've never installed it that way and filled the seams with caulk. Problem is, they did a lackluster job of that too, leaving gaps or missing sections entirely. My contractor hired the wrong people for the job. I spent almost an entire day fixing all the caulking after the fact. They say if you want something done right, you gotta do it yourself. This is one of those cases. Oh, one more issue is where the exterior lights are. Mounting lights on an angled or uneven surface makes the lights look funky. Instead of just cutting around them, they should have used trim to make a flat surface around the junction box. It's not the end of the world, just an annoyance that I should have brought up ahead of time. Lesson learned. I took on the job of painting myself. I've used smaller sprayers before, but this is something else. It's about 1,500 square feet of surface to paint. I spent a day prepping and a day painting. Prepping included power washing the building, especially the lower sections near the dirt, and taping and masking any areas that would not be painted, including the doors, electrical outlets, etc., etc. Painting went relatively smoothly, considering it was my first time using a sprayer like this. We went with ultra pure white for the building. It's been up for a while now and still looks great. After testing a few samples on the doors, the final color was picked, and I brushed both doors. This shade of blue is called Oslo Blue, and we're really happy with it. Okay, the painting was done, and now it was time for the barn doors. This was a big hurdle to jump over, partly because it's a monster to build, and partly because I wasn't completely sure if it would work. The reason for going with exterior barn doors is because I didn't want any kind of garage opening mechanism getting in the way inside the workshop. Also, big sliding barn doors just look bomb. I made a detailed plan, purchased the materials, and got to work. I started with the track and cover. I knew the doors would be heavy, so they had to be able to hold a bunch of weight easily. This part wasn't terribly difficult. I just had to be meticulous about making it level and at the right height. The cover was built in a way to prevent water from making its way behind the top of the door. Everything should run down the outside front of the doors. The opening is 9 feet tall and 10 feet wide, so each door has to be slightly larger than that to have overlap around the outside. The body of the doors are made of tongue and groove boards, glued together tightly. Then, I attached a layer of fancy trim boards to the front and back to lock it all together. I added some plywood to the gaps in the back, so the inside is clean and doesn't have the tongue and groove look. When the doors were fully assembled, I painted them black and white. I attached the rollers, and then they were ready to go up. My dad came down to help me mount the doors because each door weighs 200 pounds and is way too heavy and large to do solo. When we got both doors on, the true test was to see how well the doors fit together.
Oh, dude. That's pretty good. Yeah.
Oh boy, what a sight to see. It was perfect. This building was really coming together. I then added some handles and cam action locking hardware. All of that is still working great. It was a slow process trying to get the next couple of steps to happen. These were all finished work steps my contractor was responsible for. Installing all the electrical outlets and lights, bathroom tile, shower doors, plumbing fixtures, water heater, guest house floors and baseboards, and the air conditioning unit. It took way too long for all these to happen. However, once all that was done, we could move on to the last major step, and that is the concrete driveway and walkway around the building. There was a bit of grading that needed to happen. Then drains were installed, and all the prep work and forms were completed. The day that the concrete was poured was just a big relief. This seemingly never-ending journey of constructing this building was coming to an end. In the days that followed, the drain covers were installed, the outside AC unit was added, any finished grading was done, and all the trash and debris was hauled off. 2.5 weeks after the concrete was poured, all the bureaucratic shenanigans were completed, and we passed our final inspection. What a huge weight lifted off our shoulders. After all the good days and bad days, the accomplishments and delays, a building that for so long seemed like only a dream was finally done. Now that the permits were cleared, we are free to make any modifications that we've been waiting for. Within hours of the final inspection, I changed all the exterior lights from these awful cheap lights that were code compliant to what our original plan was. These sleek barn-style lights. They look so good during the day and night. I know the light colors are different, still trying to decide which ones to go with. This chapter is now over, but the next one is just beginning. I can really get to work inside the workshop. I have so many project ideas that I've been waiting for the final inspection. Inside the workshop, I'm going to build a super unique office. Super organized part storage, hopefully sooner than later, a dust collection system, a workbench, a whole slew of marble machines. The list goes on. Also, we are now clear to work on the backyard, so a bunch of that will be demoed and cleaned out. The pandemic has really inspired the boss lady and me to be more self-sustaining. So many of the upcoming backyard projects are going to be geared towards that. That'll include a greenhouse, a ton of garden planters, and a chicken coop for chickens. That's just a taste of what's in store for the future here. I hope you've enjoyed following along, and you're looking forward to seeing what's next, because I sure am. Okay, that's it for now. See ya. Oh, and if you think it's all smooth sailing while building, you are clearly mistaken.
No. I'm just covered in paint. Ugh.
Excuse me, that's not food. Uh-oh. Hey, don't chew on that. That's not chew. That's not chew. Ew. Please. A lot of aspects to making sure that these barn doors are just right. Oh. Okay.
Now what do I do?
Just need you to get their attention.
Hi! Oh, he's smiling. This one's mad.